Today, universities are seen as a natural congregation of faculty who conducts research and teaches students. In Singapore, we have a short history, and we have drawn on these two models to establish a good foundation in research and development. To sharpen the competitiveness of our industry, we established a similar Fraunhofer model in an organization that we call A*STAR, which bridges academia and industry in R&D. In 2010, Singapore launched the RIE program, which stands for Research, Innovation and Enterprise, where the government provides sustained funding for R&D. A significant portion of the budget then went to universities, and from there, we developed the American-style research universities model, particularly in NUS and NTU. We also set up research centers of excellence, which were standalone research institutes, which will progressively be brought into the universities. Building on the success of the existing research centers of excellence, the Ministry of Education has launched a new grant call to appoint up to 2 new centers directly into our autonomous universities. They will develop capabilities in new areas and seed future opportunities for emerging industries. So today, regardless of the model we choose, research is a robust and tight discipline across the world. With standards and processes, they are upheld globally. The tenure system admits only high-quality talent into the fraternity of researchers in a university. They have to publish their work, subject to peer review, and have their impact evaluated, and most of the time through citations. Those outcomes, in turn, are widely used to drive the global rankings of universities. Yet all of us should constantly question how the current research model, the system of ranking and evaluation, needs to evolve with the times. After all, every industry we know of is subject to disruption, and so is ours. And this was a topic discussed at a recent panel discussion in Singapore. In Singapore, every 2 years, we will convene an international advisory panel. These are members who are presidents or vice chancellors of quite famous universities around the world, Asia, Europe, West Americas, as well as CEOs of global companies. And we gather once every 2 years to discuss the future of our academic institutions. So the panel this year, they felt that universities are undergoing a fundamental change. And I will summarize the panel views as follows. We know that learning has to be lifelong now. But as people learn for life, what does it then mean to have a degree? Given that graduates will need to constantly update and upgrade their knowledge throughout their lives, knowledge and skills throughout their lives. Then what should be that body of knowledge and skills that should make up a degree? What kind of breadth, what kind of depth? And these are fundamental questions about a university education. And the degree and its definition is undergoing a major rethinking. There is realization that lifelong learning will change the rhythm and the mix of education. There is less pressure for universities to front-load knowledge during the formal years of undergraduate studies, and more effort is required to make university education experiential. So students now in Singapore, they go on overseas exchanges for cultural exposure. And as Professor Tan Eng Chai said, they go for entrepreneurial stints as well. They immerse themselves in community and social work. We have a few undergraduates in the background. They are not to be seen, but they told me they are ambassadors. And so they are also doing some form of social work while they are studying. They go on internships, work on research projects, germinate business ideas, and spin-off startups. In fact, they now populate the incubators in universities across the world, creating a never-seen-before buzz and a can-do spirit on campuses. And when they step out of campuses, they can drive the growth of entire industries. So with researchers pushing the frontiers of knowledge and students constantly on the go, universities are changing the character of cities. If a city is vibrant and dynamic and has transformed its economic makeup from old to new industries, there is a good chance that a university is the underlying driving force of that change. Against the deep changes happening in universities, it is not surprising that when it comes to the issue of international university rankings, the international panel was quite unanimous in expressing that today's methodology needs to be enhanced to take into account the varied and profound roles of universities today. The ranking system also, and probably unintentionally, gives the impression that there is only one research-based model of success for universities, when in fact they have diverse social and economic missions and objectives. So if there is a change I wish for, or an improvement I wish for in the international ranking system for universities, it will be to evaluate the effectiveness of university in collaborating with the world outside of academia. The world outside that comprises industries, society, communities, government, and delivering impact in all these sectors. This will go way beyond publications and citations, which are easiest to measure and we may have relied on quite a lot. There are two aspects of collaboration with the outside world. The first is institutional collaboration. Singapore universities in this regard have set up many corporate laboratories with major global and local industry players in their campuses. These laboratories combine the practical expertise of industry and the research powers of the academia to seek the next competitive breakthroughs and innovation. We are bringing industries into campuses and vice versa. So it is not just a flipped classroom, but also flipped campuses, flipped faculties, not just asking students to contribute in class with the lecturer facilitating, but industries contributing to education. I had a deep impression when I visited a Singapore military facility a couple of years ago. There was a commemoration plaque of engineers who worked on this impressive project. On one side were the engineers of the Ministry of Defense, but I saw that many of them also have professorial titles in universities, NUS and NTU. On the other side of the project team were professors of universities, but unfortunately they were not given military titles. But that was impactful work and an impactful collaboration needed between universities and the Ministry of Defense. Another example where I am now in the Ministry of Education, the NIE, National Institute of Education, is located in NTU, and it offers a good model where Singapore's Ministry of Education trains all our teachers. But beyond that, the faculty of NIE conducts research and spearheads innovation in education, which translates into classroom practices and better student outcomes. So one research finding shows that by allowing students to generate solutions to novel mathematical problems, as opposed to being told the formula, they can eventually better understand the concepts that are taught to them and significantly outperform their counterparts in a traditional direct instruction classroom. And this basically affirms the inquiry-based education approach that is widely practiced now in Singapore's classrooms. The second aspect of collaboration with academia and the outside world is the internal talent recognition and management system of a university. Universities need to recognize the impactful work of academia in industries and governments and in communities, and encourage a flow of talent between the sectors, in and out of academia. I'm therefore encouraged that experts from Alibaba, from Google, are now teaching artificial intelligence in NUS and NTU. Recently, Melly Caballero Anthony from NTU, she was promoted to full professor for her work in chairing the United Nations Advisory Board on Disarmament Matters, and that was in 2016. And she also served as the Director of External Relations at the ASEAN Secretariat. So she was recognized for those work outside of university and given professorship. The Harvard Kennedy School is a good example to show us how talent in industries and academia can reinforce each other. At Kennedy School, academics can join the government for several years and then return to academia. Conversely, members of government can join the academia as a next career and contribute to teaching and research in school. And if we do that, I may have a second career in NUS. The NUS Yonglulin Medical School, a National University hospital, they are situated side by side physically. University graduates from Yonglulin start their practice in the hospitals. Then they gain experience, they may complete their residency and specialist training, undergo a master's in medicine, and then contribute back to the university as a faculty in teaching and research. And if they do research instinctively, their research will be informed by challenges and problems they face as practitioners. And some of this research can be very fundamental. So a fundamental breakthrough in a local Singapore hospital then contributes immediately to global medical know-how. So for example, NUS and the University of Malaya Medical Center, together with 2 Singapore's hospitals and 2 Malaysian hospitals, have been working together for the past 8 years in an ongoing study on chemotherapy for children with leukemia. So in a recent study, they discovered that increasing the intensity of treatment for children with high-risk leukemia can improve the recovery rate from 70% to 90% and cut down recurrence significantly. So in my view, there is also, I've been talking about STEM quite a bit, so in my view, there's a great collaboration potential in social sciences and the humanities between academia, the social sector, and communities and governments. There is a clear imperative. Globalization has put stress on societies. Far-right parties are gaining ground in many countries, asserting identity politics. Inequality and social stratification is an issue across all mature societies. There is urgency and imperative for researchers in the social sciences and humanities to examine these issues of the day in a robust, evidence-based, scientifically rigorous, outcome-focused way. In this pursuit, we should allay the worries that a social scientist has no future doing local research. It says in Singapore, we are a multicultural, urban, and international city, and we are a microcosm of the world. Many countries are in fact curious about our social and governance solutions and our experiments. For decades, for example, China sends thousands of senior officials and mayors to Singapore to study our solutions, as we are an interesting reference point for China. And whatever works in Singapore, China can consider that for other cities in China. The fact is, all around the world, whether it is inequality, identity politics, racial harmony, societies face similar challenges, driven by the same deep global forces, but manifesting locally. Likewise, the way to teach a child to become better in mathematics is not likely to differ between classrooms in Singapore, US, Brazil, Germany, or Djibouti. Social science research will need to be imaginative, to be confident that local research can have a global audience. And by focusing on the fundamentals. Then what is seemingly local can find global application. And that is why a simple study by Professor Teck Hua, which showed that in Singapore, yellow taxis are less prone to accidents than blue taxis. And that was widely published. Because across cities, drivers have similar habits on the road and they recognize the same colors. In conclusion, I wish Times Higher Education all the best as it evolves its existing system to better evaluate the performance of modern universities. The academia world needs your service and your innovation. Academics and researchers, by nature, are curious people. So I think I'm in safe company to express the many questions I have in mind on the future of universities and research and ranking. I'm supposed to take questions for the next 20 minutes, but really, I would also welcome some answers. Thank you.
The first question will be, suppose a ranking agency like THE were interested in producing a ranking of public universities, And let's define public university to be any university that is mainly funded by the government. If THE were to solicit your inputs in this designing this ranking of university, what input would you emphasize? And for example, would you actually place greater emphasis on graduate employment outcomes?
Question is for me or for
you?
For me.
For you.
In my view, or in Singapore, we have three major objectives in our universities.
Yeah.
One is education, one is research, and one is lifelong learning. Yeah. For education, I think it has to go beyond. We have not quite cracked the problem, quite cracked this issue, how to measure quality of education. We all know that if you ask a student to fill up a form at the end of the class, that's highly inaccurate. The forms with the worst feedback often is the most beneficial to the student, but they wouldn't know until they graduate 10 years, after 10 years after they graduate. So I think you need a combination of both immediate feedback, employment outcomes upon graduation, and some more longer-term longitudinal study for the student to express what was the true quality of education and how did that affect them for the rest of their life, not just as a worker, as a career person, but also as a person, as a human being. So I hope a ranking organization like THE can help crack this problem and find a way that we can evaluate in an objective, evidence way the quality of education. On research, I've expressed my view. I think we need to measure impact that goes beyond citations and publications, but also what difference a university is making in societies, in communities, in industries, in the world. And there should be many other methods to do so. It does not mean that we move away from fundamental research. I think there's a space for fundamental research, but also a space where those research can translate into impact.
Okay. So now actually I would like to open the conversation to the floor. Anybody who wants to speak, please let us know your name and affiliations. Anybody would like to ask the questions? I know that president and provost are generally not shy people, so yes.
I knew she would be the first.
Okay. Please. On the microphone.
I should really thank the minister's speech, and I have a question. Singapore is very well known for its elementary education because it has very high scores in PISA tests. And so my question is, for Singapore probably has the best pool of undergraduate potential. So my question is, the government's views about sending those young people abroad or attract them to study in Singapore. So that's my question.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't get the last question. The government's view to send Singaporeans abroad?
Send young people about 17 years old, 16 years old to abroad, or attract them to stay in Singapore to finish their higher education.
Okay.
Understand?
When I just finished high school and A-level, at that time, nobody's aware of ranking. And as a boy grew up in a humble family background, if I have a chance to be overseas, I will go overseas. And that was the mentality. And when I was given a scholarship, I just grabbed it. And then a school accepted me that was really nice, LSE, and I just went to LSE. And 3 years opened up my mind. That was how we were driven. Today, there are many more children who already have that exposure. So if you study not just university, if you go to high school, what we call JC, or even secondary school, chances are they may have an overseas trip and be exposed to overseas. And they may take family tours as well. So it's a new generation with more exposure to the world. And when they grow up, they will look at our local universities, rank high around the world, and really, I think, one of the best universities in the world.
Thank you.
So I very much would like to see young, promising Singaporeans, if they are ever given scholarships, they choose not just to go overseas, but also study locally in NUS, NTU, SMU, and all the other universities. Every year we select probably 100 over young Singaporeans, give them scholarships in return for a bond to serve the government. And amongst them, we select a few top ones that we then confer what we call President's Scholarship. So this year, the President's Scholars, I noticed that
There's one stay
there's
at
one
Ivan.
who decided to study locally. And I think it's a good development. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions from the floor? Oh, there's Simon.
Thank you very much. Simon Chesterman, Dean of NUS School of Law, so I think I'm outranked by almost everyone here for a change. So, Minister, thank you for your remarks. When I was appointed Dean 7 years ago, I made a statement to the media that I wanted to produce creative law graduates, and I had some people come back to me and say, don't you understand the whole Singapore education system is designed to produce people who do very well in tests but are not creative. Now, I think that was wrong, but that is a misapprehension of some education systems like Singapore, which are extremely rigorous. Could you talk a bit about how you think universities, but also primary and secondary school systems, can produce not just people who do very well in PISA tests, as our friend from Beijing pointed out, but are also creative and innovative?
Yeah, PISA tests we've been doing quite well, both at the I think 10-year level and 10-year-old level and 16-year-old level, 14-year-old level. But in 2015, PISA came out with a new test on creative problem solving. And the expectations were a country like Singapore, who score well in the academic subjects, will not do well in the creative problem solving PISA test. So guess what's the results of 2015? Who came out top in the world? It was Singapore.
Okay.
So that was a surprise. So I don't think that is mutually exclusive, to be creative and at the same time able to score well in tests, because you actually understand the concepts. And understanding the concepts and mastering it actually is the necessary condition to be creative. The thing about education, whether it's elementary level or university level, when you make a change, and we have been making many changes, you wouldn't know the outcome till 10 years, 20 years later, which is why I think when we evaluate education quality and impact of education, it has to be a lot deeper, a lot more longitudinal. So many changes have happened throughout our education system. Of course, in the meantime, there is always that self-critique that maybe our students can be more creative, maybe our entire society can tolerate risk better, can have a higher tolerance for risk and be more creative. But changes are in fact underway, and I think you wouldn't see the full results until 10, 20 years later. But we are starting to see. And if you come to a university campus, you can feel the buzz. You can feel that students today are doing things differently from the time when I was a student. And I cannot imagine myself doing things that they are doing today. So change is underway, Simon.
Yes, please, Susan.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Suzanne Fortier from McGill University. You started your remarks by talking about two very important models, the Fraunhofer, the German model, the US model, how you've used those models and how you've integrated them. Do you think that you have an opportunity, or I might phrase it, do you have an ambition that in 20, 30 years from now, we'll be talking about the Singaporean model? That you will create enough innovation in the way that you shape your education research system, that there will be a model that will come from this country that we will all like to emulate?
Yeah. In Singapore, because of our geography, being between East and West, and we're in the middle of archipelagic Southeast Asia, we tend to look East and West all the time. And we we copy. We see what works in other countries. We don't try to reinvent the wheel. We absorb what other people have tried and worked, and then adapt it to our environment. In a way that reflects the fact that trade comes through, 60% of trade, or world trade, comes through Southeast Asia, Straits of Malacca, 40 or 60%. And that is what we are and how we have been wired to think. And in that process, if we come up with a model, there's a combination of East and West, that will be a privilege and an honor. But we just try to do our best to build something that is adapted to our conditions and work for Singapore.
Please. And then in front.
Anton Muscatelli, University of Glasgow. Minister, Singapore has been really successful reinventing itself over the years industrially, and how do you know, if you look ahead to the next 30 years, what changes do you think will have to happen to your education, higher education system to deal with the lifelong learning challenges which will exist with an aging society, the need to retrain for yet new industries that you will specialize in as a country? Because this is one of the major challenges which we face in the advanced economies. How do you think Singapore is going to be dealing with those challenges?
It's a huge question. What you ask is a huge question. So if I can just touch on two aspects. Economically, I choose economics because every of our undergraduates is thinking about their jobs, many of them. Economically, we are transforming ourselves. The days when we grow through population growth and manpower growth, I think that is over. It has to be driven by innovation, driven by productivity. Instead of drawing in MNCs and FDIs to create jobs, to set up plants and build offices, we now have to nurture enterprises that go out to our region, 650 million market within Southeast Asia, and then in China, India, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand, all these are our immediate hinterland. So from drawing in FDI, now we nurture enterprises to go out. From making things, because FDIs come in, set up factories, from making things, we have to create things. From R&D, from entrepreneurship and enterprises coming out of universities and industries, we have to make things. So in that kind of environment, you are constantly on the move, you are constantly understanding your customers and building new products and services and be at the forefront of technology. You need to learn for life. So our whole education, therefore, first, we need to change to be able to nurture that joy of learning, that curiosity in our students, because that's what will drive you to learn for life. Learn for life is no fun. Learn for life is going to be tough. Whatever domain you choose is going to be tough. And so if you're going to go through this tough process through life, at the very least, have a passion for it, because that's what helps you overcome whatever obstacles that's come your way. So that learning for life, the joy of learning, getting students to do what they are passionate about has to be a key focus within our system. Teck came up with a creative way for admitting students this year in NUS. If you choose your first choice, he's giving you them 2 bonus points.
1.25 bonus.
1.25 bonus points. An MIT faculty professor called me after that to say there are game theories that say this may not be a great idea. But I think it worked for you so far, because I think you are getting in students into faculty, into an area of study that they are most interested in. And I think we are more likely to learn for life in an area that we are interested in.
True.
A second area is actually social. Social stratification, inequality, these are issues that all of us face in mature societies. I think we have a young generation that grew up that feels a lot more about their communities and societies. Education has to nurture that. I think not just full of head when you come out and full of brains, but also having a heart for society, for your community. Because in a globalized world, it cannot be mutually exclusive that either you are a citizen of the world or you live locally. I think the two are actually reinforcing The more you feel strongly about your locality and your community, the more confident you are to face the outside world. So I would just say education in the broad sense, I think we need to focus on these two intangibles. Yeah.
So Minister, maybe I'll just add on to that questions. I mean, in some way, I know you have been very passionate about lifelong learning, and what does success look like for you in a decade? Maybe 10 years from now, when you look back, what do you think you'll be very happy? You see, wow, we have done well. How do you judge your success 10 years from now?
I hope I walk into NUS and beyond seeing just faculties who are researchers, I see practitioners, mingling with them, working together. Beyond seeing students who are young and has not worked a day in their lives, I also see adults who has a career but coming back to learn, and you see a very good interaction between learners of different age groups, learning from each other. I think that will be a nice outcome 10 years from now.
Okay, one last question. We are running short of time. Please, yeah.
Thank you very much. Mr. Minister, you talk about models. You talk about the change of the elements you are doing to these models in terms of, behaving better. So my question is, what are the indicators, what are the elements you are observing in these models in terms of return of, for instance, return of investment to this model called education and innovation and entrepreneurship in Singapore?
Yeah. The return on investment in education and training is an issue that has been studied for a long time. It's difficult. It's difficult to isolate the impact of education and training. Sometimes we may just have to, there are some training that you can identify and isolate the impact, but by and large in education, it is really a public good, and it's quite hard to, you can seek correlation, but it is hard to seek causality. So I would usually just look at, to make sure that whatever money we have invested in education, we produce students that can find work, who are good citizens, contribute to society. Singapore remains stable, happy, vibrant economy, a warm, kind-hearted society. I think that will be a good outcome. Yeah.
I think we come to the end because the time is running short. So can you guys join me in thanking Minister Ong Ye Kung, please?